So, welcome back to the Purple Worm. I'm joined as ever by my fellow co-hosts Pete Jones from Dragons Are Real, Dave Aldridge from Deep Percentile, and of course Colin Green from Spike Pit. And in this episode, we're going to talk about a topic that's been inspired by some previous conversations we've had with other OSR anchorites on the Discord and various different podcasts. And the topic is old school 5th edition. Would you? And more importantly, should you? So I believe it was Spencer from Keep Off the Borderlands who originally suggested this, and I know you sort of mentioned, Colin, that adding a bit of an old school flavour to 5th edition can sometimes seem a little bit contentious. Again, part of that's wrapped up in the whole debate about what actually constitutes old school, which, as we know, is a discussion that's going on amongst the anchorites at the moment. And it's been a discussion that's occurred numerous times. So, Colin, I know you sort of use like the quick start rules for 5th edition, and I've been talking to you a little bit about that on Discord. Would you care to give a bit of just a brief sort of summarisation of like why you use the quick start rules and what you think the benefits of those is, as opposed to using like the full 5th edition rules?
Yeah, so I jumped back into RPGs basically with the starter set for D&D 5th edition. That came with because there's a little bit of confusion over this. So the starter set rules are rules to get you up and playing. They're the lightest version, but there's no character generation. So if you want that, you actually need the basic rules, which is the free rules. So there's more of them, yet they are actually free, and they are the ones that you can download and then print out your copy. There's been it used to be 2 books. There was like a DM's one and then a player's one. A little while back, they had they sort of rationalised it and made it into this one set of basic rules. I took that, printed it out, A5, and made it into a book. And now I will confuse people because that has got the Beckme Mensa red cover on it. Because I can do that.
You'll also confuse the people who are listening to the audio version of this, because I don't know what the hell you're talking about.
Oh yeah, so I'm holding up the Beckme basic with a red dragon and the warrior, the Elmore, the famous Elmore. Yeah, and I stuck that on there. It's a little sort of joke to myself. But inside there, you've got pretty much. You've got basic D&D, so you've only got 4 classes. You've got your warrior, you've got a wizard, a rogue, and a cleric, and then you've got humans, dwarfs, elves, halflings. It seems like they've maybe had a little bit of a separate agenda going on. It is actually like basic. Yeah, and they've limited the options, so it really is like basic. The spell list is limited. Yeah, interestingly, I think I had a count up, and it's basically the same number of spells as you get in old D&D.
Oh, right. So I take it they've not altered the sort of the hit points, starting hit points, or things like feats. Then it's just a pared down version, is it?
There's no feats in here.
Oh, there's no feats, no.
No feats, no.
All right.
No,
isn't
none of that
feats an optional system in 5th edition? I can't remember.
Yeah, it's optional. Yeah, I've never played with feats. You've got enough features to think about as it is. I just didn't feel the need for them. I think they're there for people that had them.
If you want to dual wield automatic crossbows and stuff like that, you need feats for that. It's for all that kind of stuff, but you don't need it for the basic.
Yeah, because you can just rule it, don't you?
But like I said, you've got the sort of pared down character creation in there, Colin.
Yep.
What does it offer in terms of like DM stuff? Like advice on like running the game, like stuff like that.
Never looked at it. Never really looked at it.
Has it got any like travel rules or like stuff like that? Like you tended to get in the older edition, like you get your hex crawl sort of stuff and whatnot.
Couldn't say because I took them out of this copy, and I never printed it when they revised it. I never printed off the DM section because I've been doing it a bit too long for that, and I've just done my own thing.
Yeah,
but that's all exactly as Colin says. That's all stuff you don't need in your core. I mean, that's all stuff. Nobody's ever happy with what's in the basic rules anyway. You always find a module that does it better. So I don't think you need that stuff in your core rules.
There's a section on adventuring. Yeah. Actually, there is a section on adventuring, and I think that covers flying movement, surprise reactions, stuff like that.
What I will say about that is, if you've got a copy of that, you're more likely to get a game with a face-to-face group than you are trying to get an OSR game going.
Well, this is what sparked all my thinking of this again. Cody Mars are coming on talking about the trouble that he had when I originally talked about, why is everybody ragging on sort of 5e? What's up with 5e? I did like 10 episodes, and my argument was I've always played D&D. I don't want to be left behind. I want to keep a pace with it. And I feel like it's a shame if there's youngsters coming into the game and I don't know what they're talking about. I don't want to be left behind out of some sort of stubbornness.
So we've started on your route in, Colin, and yours is that you've got this more stripped down version of 5e. So my route is slightly different, but it's aligned. Yeah. So my route is, as I constantly talk about, I was playing since the 80s, but I wasn't playing D&D. I didn't come to D&D until 3rd edition. Didn't like 4th edition, it's been said. Did like 5th edition. In fact, the longest campaign still that I've played ever, and that's even since 5th edition, it hasn't been out that long, was 5th edition. And because I was doing the experience wrong, they were leveling up really quick. So actually it was also one of the most high-leveled things that I've done. But all the time I was playing that, and along the way I got hold of Dungeon Crawl Classics, which gave me a sense of what I was trying for. But all the way I was playing that, I was thinking, you've got to be able to strip this down. I don't need all of these class options. I had the basic rules. That's not really what I meant. I mean, you've got to be able to strip this down. And I got hold of Chris Gonneman's Basic Fantasy, right? Now, this is not, all credit to Chris Gonneman, right? It's one of those ones I admire that you can buy it on Amazon for nothing. He gives it out for free. He just wants his rules out there. Now, it's not my favourite clone. It's just not my favourite clone, but it was the first one that I encountered. And I looked at that, and this is someone who's never played anything before 3rd edition. So I looked at it, and I was just like, I can't get my head around this. I don't know why I'm rolling a D6 for initiative. I don't know. Remember, I started on 3rd edition, so unified systems, unified saves, all that kind of stuff. I'm like, why are there all these different experience costs for leveling up in different classes? Why have they got? I can't work out why the fighter should have these bonuses and the other classes should have those bonuses. And then you look at 5th edition. So you take that model, if you like. That's all I had. Chris Gonneman's Basic Fantasy, Dungeon Crawl Classics, but that's a more creative, unique kind of thing. And I was thinking, well, this is really nice and stripped down and slim, and I can see myself playing this with the kids. I can see myself having freedom to do what I like. And then you look at 5th edition, you think, if I just populated those tables out of 5th edition, it's just much cleaner. So it's a slightly different path for me, but I think it's linked to Colin's.
So we've both, in our own ways, done it so far then.
Right,
I mean, let's not forget, I'm the one. I sent Spencer packing when he called in because I said, let's talk about OSR in the 5th ed. And Colin went, oh yeah, been there, done that. And John said, I've got no interest in doing that. And Pete, I think you chortled. So I told Spencer we weren't interested in doing it, and they were all like, yeah.
And I was outraged.
but you said you were the one, Colin. You went, yeah, been there, done that. So I misrepresented that. It's like no one's got any interest.
Right, yes.
I've done it.
Yeah. Spencer mentioned 5 Torches Deep. Have any of you read it? Because I've got a copy here. The 5 Torches Deep says it's old school using the 5E way. So that basically it's OSR mechanics with the principles to people familiar with 5E. And he classes the OSR as danger is real, it's cunning over crunch, magic is haphazard, and travel and resources. So those are what he classes as the OSR. And the difference between 5 Torches Deep and 5E is that 5 Torches Deep has weaker PCs. He has a default DC of 11. No dump stats. And I'm going to come on to those because what he's done with the stats is quite different, actually. And he's brought some new mechanics in. So he's got 4 classes. Well, I'll go on to the races first. You've got human, dwarf, elf, and halfling. Interestingly enough,
surprise.
But they don't have special abilities. The only thing your race determines is what dice you roll for your ability scores and your class restrictions. So, for example, a dwarf is limited to a thief if he's got 13 plus dex, and a mage 13 plus int. Otherwise, he can be whatever he wants. But his ability scores are con and strength are 13. He rolls 2d6 plus 3 for dex, int, whiz, charisma in order. There's 4 classes: warrior, thief, zealot, and mage. And everybody levels up, no matter what you are, at the same XP. So 2,500 XP gets you to level 2 for whichever class you are.
Right, and that's the best thing that 5th Ed can do for the OSR, because there's no justification for those.
So the way he does his 4 classes, each class has got a subclass. So I'm only going to do the warrior class, but at warrior class, at level 1, you start with a +2 proficiency bonus, your starting HP, and warrior equipment. Level 2, you get a counter-attack and melee as a quick action up to twice a fight. At level 3, you pick a warrior archetype and gain one of its features. And the archetypes for warrior are barbarian, fighter, and ranger. And the same thing happens at level 7. You pick another feature from your archetype, and then you get extra abilities in between. Now, when it comes to the weapons, he's done something a bit strange. So if you're using a club, you're rolling 1d6 plus strength modifier for your damage. But if you're using a crossbow, you do a 1d12, and either you choose your dex or your whiz modifier. So what he's trying to do is get some of these dump stats to be used in other ways.
It all sounds lovely, but under that theme of OSR in 5e, I can't see, and I'm not being the OSR police here. I'm just saying, it sounds to me like what he's done is he's just trying to fix 5e for the game he wants to play.
I mean, to me, it's not OSR and it's not 5e.
Where my basic rules here, you just become a champion at 3rd level, so there's no choice of archetype. You're just a champion.
He's keeping the trappings. Like what things do you want? What do you want 5e to learn from OSR? What you want it to learn from. Currently those class descriptions in 5e are like 5 or 6 pages long. Yeah. What you want them to learn from OSR is you can fit them on 2 sides of A5.
The only thing I found in this book, which I thought has got some legs, is supply, and so each PC is supply up to their int score, and that is the stuff that you bring with you, and it's sort of represents your ability to plan ahead. And it's one of these things where you say, oh yeah, I need some rope. Well, I've got, you don't record it, but you say, that cost me 1 supply. So you take that out of your supply. Yeah, you've got rope with you this time. Or for 5 supply, oh yes, I'm prepared. I've got holy water with me. And that's probably the only...
So why I'm torn on that is that's a lovely indie modern gaming innovation, right? It's got nothing to do with the old games, right? Now, I'm not saying OSR needs to be to do with the old games, because I love games like the Black Hack and Ben Milton stuff, which are recreations built on the spirit of the old game. But he needs to make up his mind what he wants to do.
All right, so let me float this out to come back to Colin's basic 5th edition that he's been talking about. In a couple of weeks, I'm going to be running a game at a local convention, and I want it to be, because obviously there's a limit to how much I can sort of take down to the venue. So I've settled on running the Barrow Maze, partly because I'm familiar with it because I played in Cody's game, and also I've got the book for it. And it's the sort of setting where you can turn groups of random players loose on it and go, have at it. So it's quite easy for like a pickup. You know, you can have people turn up and like, okay, jump in this. Yeah, get a character, jump in. Now, at the minute, I'm currently sort of planning, because I just want to take a simple game down with me, that I don't have to lug tons and tons of books down with me. So I've picked up like the Delving Deeper, because I'm familiar with it from Cody's game. Now, if I was to, because I'm intrigued by your mention of 5th edition basic version, if I was going to try and use that to run my Barrow Maze game, do you think that would work, Colin? Based on your experience of it?
Yeah, I think so. If you could go on. See, this is the other thing. The other great thing about if you go with D&D, there's just so much of it. You know, you're never going to find yourself in a desert with it.
Because I've got to admit, again, also as you're aware, I run some of the games for Games on Demand at UK Games Expo. Now, again, when I travel down there, because all of my stuff has to be carried with me in like a backpack, and in like one of those wheelie suitcases, because I'm going down on the train. We try and run like a selection of different games. Now, there's no earthly way that I'm going to chuck like all my D&D 5th edition books in like a backpack and take it down there, because that would be all I'd take with me. Now, however, the idea of, like you say, printing out an A5, this very basic version, because obviously I'm only running like 2 hours of taster games, that sounds very appealing to me as something that people would be familiar with, and that I also have a familiarity with, and could run without having to go through all the rigmarole of all the extra books. From
I think that's key. As the GM, if you've got familiarity with it, then
the original question of can you OSR 5th edition, you can interpret it in two different ways, right? The first way of interpreting it is, can I play an OSR style game, whatever I think OSR style is, with 5th edition? Our answer, of course you can.
Yeah.
Of course you can. Colin's saying he does it all the time. He can't un-OSR his style of play. Further advantage is he's got the basic thing, which is more stripped down, easier to carry around, right? I think we probably answered that one, right? But there's the other one, which is what Pete's mentioned, is can you tweak the mechanics using a 5th edition chassis? It's not sounding to me like 5 Torches Deep, although it says it's doing that, is even bothering to try doing that. But I think that's worth thinking about as well. And my line on that would be, you probably can. What you want to take inspiration from is something like White Hack or Black Hack.
Yeah.
And say, what's the real core at the bottom of 5th edition? It probably is, for each character, it's probably just that simple little table, right? XP cost, as you say, Pete, unified XP cost for leveling up. And then it's your proficiencies. And then maybe it's something in the background about how skills or weapons interact with proficiencies. So different classes have different things. And then probably the inspiration you take from Black Hack and White Hack is, given that table, which is the same for every single character, those are your proficiency bonuses. They'll just apply to different things. You probably then just want 3 or 4 key abilities that will fit on a facing page, right? I think those are the things you take. The bounded proficiency, that table, difficulty levels, advantage, and then you just make your character sheet look like Black Hack or White Hack with a few. I think you can do that. And it would still be 5th ed. It would be the basic core. It would be the way that 5th ed works. It would be the die science from 5th ed, but really stripped down. And I think that's a slightly different question. So we've got 2 questions. I mean, definitely, I'm with you, Pete. I'm with you, John. That what you want to take, if you want to run it in a 5th ed way, you want to take Colin's basic rules. Absolutely, you don't need anything else, and you can do an OSR game with them. The thing you'd be doing differently was that you'd be doing, a difficulty class-based OSR game, which most of the clones don't do. Although I think you like Castles and Crusades, and it does do something a bit like third edition,
the way it works in Castles and Crusades is you have the standard 6 D&D attributes, and you mark a number of those as primary attributes and a number of those as secondary attributes. When you come to make a roll, you roll your standard D20. You get to add your attribute modifier to it. If it's a task that's particularly associated with your class, like you're picking someone's pockets and you're a rogue, you get to add your level to it as well. And then the difficulty, like the base difficulty, is either, I think it's 15 if it's a primary attribute.
Key to your attributes, yeah.
Or if it's 18 if it's a secondary attribute. And then if it's more difficult, the GM can add like 1 to 5 onto that, and you have to get equal to or above it.
Do you know what? I've got an unpopular. How about an unpopular D&D opinion or whatever we're calling this? How about 5e is D&D, and by default is OSR already? It's still D&D. It's got a clear lineage. There's no argument.
I was waiting to just see like the torches in the background through like Colin's window.
Get that pitchfork down. What's that with you? I don't think anything's really gone from D&D. Do you know what I mean? It's all still in there. I mean, when you look at these basic rules, it's like, it's just evolved a bit. But really, I don't think there's this massive. There's not this massive chasm between 5e and the OSR that people make out there is.
You know, there's more. You know, 5th edition did revive it. All right, so it's actually the old school revival.
Yeah.
It did. It revived it. So yeah, I'm kind of with that.
It's got the stuff. It's got your elves, your dwarves. It's got your classes. It's got the classic 6 stats. I think it can do. I think it does everything that earlier versions did, but it goes a bit further. I think it's improved Magic. It's added a level of complexity to Magic, but you haven't got to use it. It's added feats from whatever 3rd edition and all that, but you haven't got to use them. You can take them basic rules, and I think those basic rules, if you understand a little bit about hex crawls and you've got this memory of the game that you're trying to recapture or whatever, you perfectly can run an old school game because it is one.
I left Joe and Spencer a couple of messages on their podcast recently because they were both talking about the various things they disliked about D&D and how they've changed stuff in their games, and like they weren't sure whether it was still OSR. And I'm like, well, to my mind personally, you don't really get much more OSR than like looking at D&D and going like, oh, what would I change a little bit? Because if you look at all the retro clones, like the vast majority of them, apart from the ones that are just like, this is literally a version of BX or whatever, the vast majority are the basic D&D chassis, and then someone's gone, oh, but I like to focus on the rules for this bit a bit more, or I'd like to tweak this a bit more. So to my mind, like taking something like D&D and tweaking it to suit your own personal taste, as we were saying earlier, like you could do with this 5th edition sort of basic version that Colin's talking about, you don't really get much more OSR than that, in my opinion.
So here's the thing they could do for the new players. I mean, we've played lots of games. We've seen all the different iterations. So we can see how, if we didn't like the magic system in D&D 5th edition, we could replace it. We can see that, and we know what complexities, because it's not, you know, there are a lot of moving parts, and if you move one bit, it does affect other things. We can see what attendant complexities would be involved in doing that. And actually, with 5th edition, there are sufficient attendant complexities that I would be a bit nervous about doing, a bit nervous about just stripping out the magic system. But one thing they could certainly do for new players, having said, make of it what you will, if you want it simpler, have it simpler. They could maybe say, here's what it'd look like if you stripped out all of that. Because, you know, at higher levels, I know we talked about this before, Colin, you've managed to either lose interest or kill everybody before it gets to higher levels. But I played a game which only went to such high levels because I was giving out XP wrong, because it's bloody complicated, the XP calculation rules in Dungeon Master Guide. But when you get to high levels, you've got all kinds of things going on all over the battlefield. You're trying to track all kinds of timers for effects that have chucked some enemies off into other dimensions. They're going to come back in 10 rounds, all this kind of stuff. And you're trying to track hit points for wolves, for the enemies. Enemies are casted raising wolves. You've got people raising zombies and skeletons. And you do just want to go, oh, I'll just pull all of that out and you'll have a much nicer game. But they don't say, here's what it would look like if you did. So if you're one of those new 5th ed players, you're not going to get near that. You're not going to move any of those parts. You're going to know, you're going to grasp that moving them is going to affect a lot of other things. So they could do that. In 6th ed, that's what they could do. Because they did a few of those things. They said, well, here's what it would look like if you did theatre theatre of the mind.
Yeah,
I don't think they went thoroughgoing, but they did do it. They said, here's what it looks like if you're doing maps. Here's what it looks like if you want to be a bit freeform about ranges. And if they showed you some of the things it would look like if you just said, right, I'm ditching that.
It's like
what it means to say that.
They've come forward with milestone experience a lot more now. Since the publication of Fifth, they've come along later books. Milestones. Yeah, maybe you don't need to worry too much.
Imagine if Sixth Ed has got an appendix, freeform magic.
I think it's an interesting idea what you're talking about, Dave. And I know they're trying to do like a much slower release schedule with 5th edition than has been traditional with previous editions. But I would like to see them bringing out books where it's almost like offering like optional alternatives. So they might bring out a book that says, like, oh, well, if you don't like the sort of fancy and magic system or whatever, here's an alternative, and we've tested this, and here's how it can work with 5th edition. Because as you say, especially if you're maybe not so sort of au fait with like adapting rules on the fly and stuff like that, it would, if you just looked at like 5th edition, because there are so many moving like interconnecting bits, it would be quite daunting to alter that, especially if you, not just if you were like new to it, but especially if you were new to it, because it could have knock-on effects to other mechanics that you might not have anticipated.
Yeah.
That's it. I think it'd be nice, instead of just like releasing stuff that's going to just add on top of the mechanics you've already got, just say stuff like, oh, you don't have to add this as well as like normal magic or whatever, but it's suggested as an alternative. So if you want a slightly different flavour for your game, here's like a book that's got, I don't know, 4 or 5 different magic systems in, and we've tested these. Here's how you use them with all the existing mechanics, and they work. So I think it'd take a bit of like the sort of heavy weight off people's shoulders.
I think they push out stuff like that to third-party publishers. Like you've got Cubicle 7 doing Adventures in Middle-earth. You've got an alternative magic system there. I know it's not what John's talking about with a range of like the Book of Magic, say, and it's got but if you look at some third-party stuff, you might go, oh, well, actually, boom, this is a low magic setting with different rules. It's got different journeying rules, so it does overland journey. It's got audiences in there. But so it's got a few other things going on.
That's no part of their schedule. They don't license any of that. That all says 5th edition fantasy. It doesn't even. It's not.
I was going to say, I mean, in terms of why they're not doing this, Pete, I would guess that, like I said, they're doing the slower release schedule at the moment. They've obviously still got plenty of other stuff that they've not yet touched that they can bring out for 5th edition. So I think, I'm just sort of spitballing based on what I know from previous editions, they tend to do all the sort of basic stuff first, like extra classes, extra magic items, modules, stuff like that. And it's only when they've got all of that out of the way, they then tend to start doing the slightly more, I suppose, like esoteric sort of niche stuff, which sometimes you get some dross in there, but occasionally you get some books where like you get like your unearthed arcanas and stuff like that, where it's got some interesting like optional stuff in it.
You could run forever with the basic rules and never pay a penny, and I think that's right. I think there's something to be said for that. I think that's pretty good that they've thrown that out there.
I like the way Colin's trying to appeal to me specifically by keep mentioning the phrase "not have to spend any money."
Well, it's just because you mentioned podding out all your money on the books, and I thought, well, yeah, but you don't have to. But what about this? Does anybody else? I know this is a little bit off at a tangent, but it's this business of we will forgive loads of stuff and weirdness in them old rules. Yet, out comes 5th edition, and people want to pick all these holes in it. Is it me, or is that a bit odd? Why this? Why is that old stuff the sacred cow? If you come out and say saving throws, what is? I just think. I think right. Gaming is older, right? Gaming is older. And I'll forgive a 5-year-old all kinds of errors that I won't forgive a 45-year-old. Right? And I think if you put something out now, it should be more grown up than White Box was. It should be more grown up than BX was. Yeah, and BX is a bloody good effort. Right? So that's the standard. BX is a precocious effort,
of a 12-year-old, right? But we are post-university now, so we can do better, and that's why. And if these people don't know that stuff and they haven't read that stuff and they can't do better, they should employ other people, because there's plenty of other people who can.
I was just going to say, personally, I'm glad I've got like another 5 years before like Dave starts calling me on all my bullshit.
Oh, you know what I mean.
No, of course I do.
I think I'm already holding you to those standards, John, which is why we knock heads so often on the audio dungeon.
I just think with D&D that if somebody's grown up playing whatever edition that they've played and they're used to, any changes to that, they're going to be resistant to it, because that is their game. That's what they've grown up with. For me, it was BX. For somebody else, it will be 3rd edition. And people like the game, often like the game they started with.
I don't agree, you see. I don't agree. It's not nostalgia.
Clearly, I clearly
it's
don't
not,
agree either.
I
know what you're saying.
I want the game to be right and good. I want it to not be broken. I want them to have thought through things that actually they were already thinking through in 1982.
Sorry, go on, John.
I was going to say, I tell you what, I do think it's a weird thing, sort of talking about that. People sort of seeing like their version as sort of like the holy grail of D&D or whatever. I always think it's weird when like you get people who are, as you said, Pete, quite sort of defensive about whatever version of D&D or whatever game they started with, and then they're like, "Oh yeah, like core D&D is my main stuff, like BX through and through," and then they're like, "Oh yeah, but I quite like White Box. I quite like this retro clone. I quite like that retro." Yeah. I'm like, but they're just the game you're talking about that someone else has changed. You know, so it's like they don't think anyone should change the game, but they also like games that game changed.
You know, this is not a grognard thing, is it, to say over the years we learn things about games, which is why new releases should be better than old releases. That's the opposite of being a grognard. That's where I am.
Yeah, and that's what I think 5e has done. I look at 5e and I think this is the game evolved. I think the game has evolved. So, just one example is your chart, the experience chart, Dave. That's just one thing. They've gone, do you know what? We don't need all these separate. Why have we got all these separate advancement? What's all that about?
Yeah.
You know, and stuff like that that's been taken away. But I don't think people give it fair credit.
So I'm ambivalent, right? I'm with you. I see some things in 5e and I just go, yep, good. It's grown up. You know, things like, especially comparing it to 3rd edition, the whole bounded difficulty and things like that. That was a fix of 3rd edition, and it's smart. Difficulty classes, I think, are quite sensible. Advantage, wherever it came from, not arguing with Jason, wherever it came from, it wants to be there. That's why all the new games use it. That's all good. And so I do. But what I don't want to say, and I don't think you're saying it either, but what I don't want to say is that 5th edition, just by virtue of being the newest one, must represent the apex.
No,
because what I also want to do is I want to look at 5th edition and go,
look at it,
because you are the newest one, you ought to be the apex, and in many ways you aren't, and I want to be able to judge you for that and say what we could be doing otherwise. But I agree, there are loads of things about 5th edition which are really neat, and you can see why they're there. Like the attempt to say, right, we're going to have saves linked to every attribute. There's no point having the 3 saves. There's certainly no point having the random 5 saves from the earlier editions. But, I actually like Fortitude, Reflex and Will. I think that's really good. But I can see why they wanted to do what the Black Hack has done, other games have done, and say, well, we'll have no distinction really between saves and skills. But then they don't actually execute that because there are no charisma saves, for example. You can scour the books and you'll make like 2 charisma saves. They're not there. So you kind of think, I see what you're trying to do, but you didn't actually achieve it.
What about in social encounters in an opposed role, presumably?
Well, I mean, you can use them how you want. When you're GMing, you can use them absolutely how you want. But actually,
you mean with the magic and stuff?
Yeah, when you read the book, there's only 2 spells that actually use charisma saves, and there's nothing really in the rules that say charisma saves do what you want them to do in social encounter.
Would they ever change those 6 stats though?
I don't think so.
No. But they did ditch the 5 saves, right? Now, the 5 saves arguably had more of an impact on your old school life than the attributes. Yeah. You know, if you go back to delving deeper, the attributes don't make much difference at all unless you roll really high or really low. They don't make any difference. Whereas the saves constantly save you from dying. You know, and yet in 3rd edition they went to fortitude, reflex, and will.
What about you then, John? Did you see the ditching of the saves? Because I was out. I got out at round about the time just before free came out.
Right.
So I never saw saves go away.
So weren't saves sort of winnowed down to about 3 saves in 3rd edition?
Right. That's and we're asking how that did you see that happen? I mean, because I came into 3rd edition. It was fortitude, reflex, and will, and that made perfect sense.
I remember that happening, and I was quite a fan of that, to be honest, because I was like, one of the things I remember from early D&D, and this is sort of like from when I was younger, it ceased to be a problem as I sort of had more experience with it, is initially there was a bit of a sort of, oh, well, I've got a save versus paralysis. All right, it's obvious when you use that. I've got a save versus wand, but I've also got a save versus magic. So I certainly remember when I first started playing it, there was a bit of sort of, oh, well, which save should I be using for this? I'm not really sure. And yeah, it was all worked out, you know, but there was that initial confusion and you had to sort of work it out. Whereas the three sort of generic sort of saves, they were quite sort of broad. I think it was reflex, fortitude, and I forget what the last one was.
Will.
So it was basically like a toughness save, a dex based save, and a sort of a mental save. Yeah. So that seemed very easy to me. You could just look at those 3 saves and be like, right, I know what each of those is for.
So you could have your 3 attributes. Then could be the same, couldn't it? You know, your strength, your mind, and your
absolutely.
Yeah, of course,
absolutely, and that would make good sense. You know, I think you're right that people will be like, you know, you get rid of the saves. There's such a, but it would be as sensible as that shift that happened from 2nd to 3rd. That's another thing. We've talked about this on the Discord, but that's another thing I would like to see is, you know, if somehow 5th edition could just take up a 1/3 of the space on stat blocks that they take.
I know, Colin, you talked about this in your recent episode on Spike Pit, where you were saying that, like, obviously you can sort of shrink those down. You can write them on like index cards and whatever. And